So if people are watching this, they can see I haven't shaved yet. So you're going to see me on the 7 a.m. Sports Center tomorrow morning, and I will look completely different. I will have shaved by then. But now this is like trade mode. You know, you got the whiskers and all that. So, but I am curious, Logan. People don't care about my beard growth or whatever, or my growth, the stubble. Trade. What do you think about the trade?
I've kind of gone through a couple different moods with it, actually. Like initially, I was kind of upset about it. Then I kind of talked myself into it. Then I talked with some people that I knew in Philly who were there with Carson. And then now I'm kind of coming back down a little bit. And I think, excuse me. So I think if you look at it just from a player standpoint, just what he brings to you athletically, I think he's an upgrade, right? Obviously, he's got a nice arm, quick release. Doesn't see the field super great. I think the back injury he had is still bothering him. He doesn't move around as well as he did in 2016, 2017, but has some athletic movability type stuff going to his game. The accuracy thing is something that comes up pretty consistently, and it's not big misses. It's like, you know, you're trying to hit the receiver on the throat and the ball sails a little on you, and it forces the receiver to make a tough catch. He does have a little playmaker to him, which you like, in a way that a guy like Jimmy G doesn't have. But with that playmaker comes a lot of variance to his game, right? It comes a lot of, you know, there are some really like, wow, fantastic, I can't believe he made that throw plays. And then there's also a lot of head scratching kind of turnover worthy plays, which, you know, to my eye, he probably has between 3 and 5 of those a game, right? So everyone says only 7 interceptions, but those turnover worthy plays, that number is pretty high. And I think you kind of ride that with a certain level of variance. You know, sometimes the defense catches it, sometimes they don't. So maybe next year they catch more of them and he has 14 interceptions. It's just, that's kind of how he plays the game. So I think from that standpoint, you probably feel like he's on the same level as Jimmy G. And when you look at the deal, you probably would have had to give up more money and maybe more trade value to get Jimmy G here. So that feels good. But the problem with this is only for a year. So what is the long-term solution? It is my question, why I have a problem with it. You gave up 2 third-round picks, right? And everyone says, oh, you can cut bait after this year. But if you're going to cut bait after next year, then what was the point of it? Is it just to kind of appease the fans? It's just kind of make everybody happy? Because I definitely think it is an upgrade, but what's the vision here moving forward, I think is the thing that gets me going. And then after, like I said, I talked with some people that I said knew him, and you hear kind of less than positive things about him as a leader and how he is in the locker room with the guys, which again is somewhat concerning when he's coming into a locker room that has a kind of a storied history, at least recent history, of not getting along super well.
And that's something I asked somebody today. I said, hey, I've heard a lot about Carson. He goes, it's probably all true. Or he didn't say probably, he goes, it's all true, without me even saying whatever it was. Right. So that was his first comment on that. What were some of because I think you bring up a good point too about, you know, what's the long-term plan? I still think that drafting a quarterback is on the table. Where that is, I don't know, but it's still on the table. What were some of the other things when you looked at the film? Because you went back and watched it today. And I actually watched some of him a couple of weeks ago because I knew he was an option. I watched some of the Jacksonville game today. What were some of the other things that jumped out at you as far as like, is just any little things or games where you just felt like, let's go to the plus side first.
Yeah. So I forget which game I was watching. I think it was the New England game. Obviously, he's still got this big arm and this playmaking ability to him. I think I referenced that earlier. Like he's rolling to his right. There's no pressure. T.Y. Hilton's run a skinny post or skinny corner, keeping it high. And he just, with the flick of a wrist, is able to launch it out there. And then in that same sequence, goes down there, gets a little bit of pressure, rolls to his left, flick of a wrist, back corner of the end zone, easy ball for the receiver. And it just those plays are why he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in 2016, just because he's got this knack for making those plays happen. I think that high upside, forcing the defense to defend every blade of grass, is something that Taylor Heinicke just can't do. Alex Smith just can't do. And now you bring a guy in who opens up that level of the defense and forces them to cover that deeper third of the field. And quite frankly, Scott Turner, at least to my eye, wants to push the football down the field a little bit more. And here is a guy who has the physical skill set to get that done. And up until this point, there hasn't been a guy here that's been able to do what Carson Wentz is able to do from a physical standpoint. Now, we talked a little bit about the positives. Some of the negatives is he's a guy you got to kind of insulate a little bit. And what I mean by that, you got to be able to run the football. You got to be able to do some quick game. You got to be able to kind of make easy throws for him, because he doesn't always make the best decision. Like when he's processing, his eyes are all over the place. I think, I don't know, I've talked to you about Jameis Winston and how consistent he is with his eyes,
Right.
holding the safety, working the read, manipulating the linebacker, and it's just so deliberate. And Carson Wentz is a little bit more frenetic with his eyes, kind of darting here and there, to and fro, and that makes me, it raises questions about how he's seeing the defense.
Do you think some of that stems from a guy who's trying to transition from being a guy who can get out of the pocket, make a lot of plays, versus now needing to stay in the pocket and have to read it differently, or maybe read it, process it in a way he hasn't before?
That's a really good question, and the answer is I don't know. I think he had elements of that to his game before, but then he could take his time and buy time, and he just had longer to hold the football because of his athletic traits. Obviously now that's not who he is anymore, and so maybe that is an issue. Maybe that is an issue working from the pocket. I will say another thing that jumps out on tape is they asked him to do a lot of stuff at the line of scrimmage, getting them into right plays, getting them into more advantageous calls. And when you talk to people like at the combine about the way third down offense is going, first and second down offense is going, that's a big element of it. It's just having a quarterback back there who can say, oh, we're getting this rotation, let's check to run away. Oh, we get this front, let's check to this run. Oh, it's third down, it looks like it's man, let's check to this play. And having that ability at the line of scrimmage and the confidence to get that done, I think is extremely advantageous. So not only does he have these physical skill set, but this mental element, which appears to be on tape. And I think that's just going to elevate and make things easier for him, hopefully. But yeah, in terms of his eye movement and things like that, maybe he never cultivated that skill set. I don't remember him having that issue back in the day. But again, he was playing in a more Russell Wilson style then, right? Kind of working to get to off schedule where throws are more open and easier kind of reads from that late in the down type of throwing element.
Well, we saw too, when he would play this team, he had the one, I think there was a season opener the one year where I think it was the third down on the first drive. They stopped him on first, second down, third down around the 48 or whatever, have him for a sack, dead to rights, spins out of it and throws a touchdown pass. Like that's the kind of stuff that when you talk about Russell Wilson type stuff, that's what he's doing. The other thing I know, the one thing that I know that they were looking for, guys who have some of that quick twitch in their throw. And I felt like I saw that with him, where, and by that, I mean, it's not just a howitzer for an arm, but it's a see it go when you're making your reads. And also, do you have to get your feet around to make that throw, to make a strong throw? Seemed like I saw that with him. What do you think?
I 1000% agree with that. You mentioned that play back in 2016 where he broke the tackle, and that guy's kind of gone. He's a shadow of himself. But I will say the elements you just talked about, and it's funny, when I was watching him, I thought about our conversation. The ball comes out of his hand quick. It's effortless to throw the ball downfield. He can accelerate his feet in his drop to get the ball out quicker, which is something you like to see from guys in the pocket. So there, again, in some ways, I like his film. I like his arm talent better than a guy like Jimmy G, for example. And if you compare them and you compare the rosters that are around them, obviously Jimmy G had maybe one of the most dynamic skill position groups in the NFL, right? So his play is going to be slightly elevated. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan, one of the best offensive minds in all of football, is calling the play for him. Then you compare that to what Carson Wentz was dealing with when he was in Indianapolis, and you have Michael Pittman and blank, right? Taylor in the backfield. And in terms of throwing, there's times where he's working to throw the football down the field and it's just blanketed across the board. I think he could work through his progressions maybe a little bit quicker, but could you imagine if he had guys who could win a little bit more quickly or more dynamic, like a Terry McLaurin, a healthy Curtis Samuels, a deep threat like De'Ami Brown, if he kind of can grow into what he needs. And those are big ifs, in my opinion, those latter two. Also, Logan Thomas, if he's healthy, is better than Jack Doyle at this point in his career. So all those things are really important variables. But again, you're kind of squinting and turning your head and looking at it in a very specific way, because three of those four guys I just talked about, two of them were hurt all last year, and one of them was a rookie who hasn't quite turned the corner yet. So you're asking for you're making big assumptions about the state of this roster to support Carson Wentz.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, and that's why I'd still look for a guy in the draft, another weapon. Two more things. One, do you feel that they are a better team now with Carson?
I mean, I think it's hard to say otherwise. I think when you look at what he does and what he brings, yes, he is. The team is better, and you look at their schedule last year and the games that they lost. You probably win 3 more games with him at quarterback, and that's a big deal. That's a significant deal. And you look at what he can do from an arm talent standpoint, and there are times where there's throws last year that Taylor Heineke just physically can't make.
Right.
And those are now on the table, right? And I think he does have a better process of the offensive line. He's got more experience. He can get you in the right plays. Like all that stuff is just going to heighten the group. The other stuff, the leadership stuff, the inconsistency, because, there's a lot of variance in, like we mentioned, turnover worthy plays. There's a lot of variance in his game. There's times where you're like, oh my gosh, like that's spectacular. I can't believe he just made that throw. And then you're kind of going the other way and saying, that is terrible. Why is he throwing that football there? There's an element. So in 2016, he was really kind of playing a lot of hero ball, but he was physically capable of doing it. And now when you watch him, I don't think he's capable the same way. So he's got to kind of shift gears and say the play's dead. The ball has to be out of my hand, even if I'm throwing it away, just to live to play another day. And I think if he can learn that, it's a big if now. Like, he's had a couple of years of kind of managing this transition in his career, and he hasn't done it. But if he can get that done, and even without that, he's definitely an upgrade. He's a good football player. He's in that Jimmy Garoppolo kind of sphere. The question is, can you help him grow and foster that growth? Because I will say in Indianapolis, they built that whole offense to kind of limit his tough decision-making. And I'd like to think that Scott Turner can do something similar here, but we'll have to see.
We'll see. And then the last thing is when you talk about the locker room stuff, how important is that at that position?
I mean, I think it's hard to overstate. I think it depends on the guy too. Like when Robert was a rookie in 2012, no one had any questions about his leadership abilities, right? Even though he was, people had their kind of gripes about him being a little bit of a different personality. Like no one said a word because we were winning football games and he made the team better. The issue comes where you're not performing to what your billing was. And what I mean by that is, you're brought in to make this team better. And then all of a sudden the team is not better and people start griping with you. And how do you handle that type of locker room adversity? And good leaders can kind of shoulder that and march straight ahead. Like Matt Ryan was a great example of that, right? Locker room's kind of in flux, but he was, like the North Star. You could set your compass by him. You get there the same time every day. Nothing was different. He would be tough with you, but also supportive and walk that fine line, especially, kind of with different individuals. He just made it work in a really nice way. And I look at, from what I've heard about Carson, that's something that he's had a hard time with. Yeah. And in a locker room where there's a lot of friction already and there's some different personalities, big personalities, that might be an issue. However, I was thinking about this before I got on the call with you, and Ron excels in that area. Ron seems to excel at keeping the team kind of on the tracks. So maybe it's not up to him to lead the team. Maybe Ron can kind of shoulder some of that burden and help the team kind of respond to Ron's leadership as opposed to Carson's leadership.
And I think the big key there is you go out and you have early success, and then everybody's going to love you. So then you go from there. So yeah. Logan, thanks a lot. It's time for me to go shave. I got to go get ready and tape a hit for Sports Center at 7 a.m. So my couple week growth is coming off, and it's embarrassing to call this a couple week growth. So thanks. But I do appreciate you coming on, man, for a second time this week. Thank you.
Appreciate you having me.